it can be really hard. It can be really epically beautiful, but it can bring so much more forward. And so I'm so grateful for all the layers of things that can get faced if we choose in relationship to embody more of who we are.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is a early morning podcast at my place with one of my best and dearest friends.
Yeah.
Courtney, so glad to have you here today.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I'm so glad. I'm here. I journeyed from the Slocan Valley. I'm in Vernon and getting to be in your cabin and sit across from you in these comfy chairs.
Yeah, this is first recorded podcast in person in the cabin. Excuse me. And yeah, as I sit here and look around, I just feel this really beautiful sense of peace and gratitude, and being able to sit and stare at you across the way here in my own place, and all the journeys that we've been on to this date so far, and all the cool magic in the future. And so I really wanted to interview you. So this is like a first, because we've had so many epic conversations over the years.
Yeah.
Can you maybe share a little bit about yourself and anything else that just feels inspiring? We don't have to have too many banks of the river today to just traverse what we want.
Okay. Yeah. So I live in the Slocan Valley in the Kootenays, and I live a really earth-based life with my beautiful partner, Mike Elliott, who I also co-create with and do work with. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then I have a little 2-year-old son named Cedar, and I have 2 cats and a dog and a garden and such beautiful community that I live with. And the way that my service shows up in the world is I have a master's of social work. I'm a registered social worker. So I've journeyed deeply into working with people and systems for 20 years.
Nicely done.
For 20 years. I even when I say that, I'm like, wait, what? But yeah, because it was right when I graduated from university that I started doing this kind of work. And I'm a somatic therapist, so I have training in somatic experiencing. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner, which is Peter Levine's work, and training in pre and perinatal somatics. And my journey has really been this weaving of the shamanic and the energetic combined, and ceremonial ritual combined with neuroscience and the somatic understanding of the brain and repatterning. And the way that all comes together is I'm really here to support relationship and interconnection and sort of the felt experience of deep intimacy and relationship, and then also the neuroscience of it and the repatterning of this in the healing of humanity, basically. You know, like for me, at the root, I really see that what Earth is needing, what I'm being guided into supporting, is the relational healing, like humans coming back into interconnection with self, with nature, with their own dharma, their soul, with spirit. And I'm here to support that repatterning and the unwinding of what needs to be unwound in our bodies that's held from generations and generations of stuff, you know?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, I can feel so much moving through my body just as you're speaking to that.
Interesting. Yeah. And so I'm really, you know, when I've been telling this story a little bit, when I was a girl and I was about 8 or 9 years old, I had this tree I would visit, and I remember standing at the tree, and I said, like, why am I here? And the tree said, you're here to help people remember connection.
Wow.
And it just told me that very clearly. And I remember that moment so clearly because I knew that was true. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that and you know, of course that also means I was here to remember connection.
Yeah.
Like you're going to be going on a big journey, Courtney, of remembering connection. And like, this is what you're contributing. Like, this is what you're here to do. And fast forward now, I've landed in this life where I've been gathering all these tools and working with people for 20 years. And now I'm getting to really deeply practice the skills of the relational world in being in conscious sacred partnership, in relationship with my partner, as a conscious mama, like raising a little one in an interconnected way. And then also like deeply cultivating conscious friendships and community. I have so many ways that I am learning about that in different circles. And then that's what I support people with. I really, in my work, I both work with people one-on-one. I work with people in group settings. And then I also work with couples. My partner and I do 2-to-2 working with couples and supporting the interrelationship between intimacy and couples. And then also sort of the trickle down of what that looks like in family with children. And and I have so many different ways I work. I'm very embodiment, but really at the core, it's like, how can we feel each other in the moment? How can we come more into that moment to moment connection of feeling and experiencing life together? And how do we hold space for all the shit that's in our systems that needs to shake loose, move out, transform, heal, so that we can actually come back to that way of being together? And that's really like the juice that moves me in life.
I definitely see that. You're like a master of connection and a master of community, and you lead women's circles, and you've led so many different things, and you've also been a big part of my healing journey. And that's kind of where we met, really, is I had a lot of stuff going on in my life, and I needed support with it. And you and I had chatted on the phone, and I ended up booking 3 days in a row with you, like 2-hour sessions. And I drove out because you're out in like Nelson area at the time in the Kootenays as well.
Little Winlaw.
I booked my own like little mini retreat, and I was like, I'm going to go do some deep dive stuff. And I definitely remember walking into your office and meeting you, and you know, there's like soul recognition moments in life. And as soon as I saw you, I knew that, I know this person somehow. I don't know how I know you, but I do. And I'm really glad that I'm here. And I have like areas I need a lot of support with. And you supported me really, really beautifully. And that was kind of the start, I think, of what then unfolded. And so for a lot of people that don't know, some listening to this will, Courtney and I co-created a retreat series called Collective Hearts. And that really, to my recollection anyways, we just stayed in contact and, you know, kept chatting, and I was leading retreat stuff and you were in that space as well. And we talked about, hey, maybe we should do something together. And it just felt like really easy to keep going in that direction. And I think both of us, and a lot of what you just shared a minute ago too, is you're here to bring like connection back and remember connection. And I feel like that's such a parallel to a lot of the work that I'm doing. We've done it in different ways, and we've traversed different paths, but that seemed to be a really organic weaving of when we came together to do the first retreat. That, you know, before we even done, people were asking like, when's the next one? And
that's right.
How long you guys worked together? And that was our first co-creating together. And it was, really seamless and flowy. And I think, it was just like the different archetypes that we represent and all of our experiences and clinical work and everything else. It blended really nicely together. And so we ended up doing another one and then another one. And we ended up doing 9 Collective Hearts series. And, they were all epic and powerful. And so I just feel really grateful because I've been able to witness your magic and mastery of nervous systems and shadow work with people and seeing where their dynamics are. And then like really being able to call it forward, but in a really healthy way, because you've cultivated that in your system. And like family constellations and the many, many different systems that have been brought into the work. And so much of the time when we were working together in each of those retreats, I would just have these moments of like, this person is so awesome at facilitating, and look at how she's speaking to something really deeply tender, but everybody feels safe and everybody is actually being invited forward in a really beautiful way. And I can see and feel the connectedness happening that now is actually healing everybody in the room, including me. And then something would show up through me and I'd say something, and then we just kind of riff back and forth, and it was always so flowy. And I'm just so grateful. And we've taken a break from that because, cool things that have happened is one of my best friends, Mike, is now your partner. And that warms my heart to have like two people that are some of my most favorite people on the planet then got together and created a family. And so for me being able to watch that, it's just been celebratory all the time. And I'm like, wait, now I get two of my best friends together at the same time. How could this be any better? And it's like, oh, they're going to create a human that is also one of my favorite people at, 2 years old. And it's so magical to just witness all the things that have unfolded and each of our growth and development and so many things that have happened over the last bunch of years that, we've been journeying together and friendship and everything else. And so it feels really, really cool to me to be in this space right now with you in proximity, but also the space that I'm at in my own evolution right now and like where you are in your evolution and the growth and development. And we get to keep sharing stories and watching each other doing things and like doing the mission of connectedness. It feels so good. Reconnecting. Yeah.
And we get to, and it's neat to watch. I mean, first of all, I just want to circle back to one piece is it still is a mystery to me how we ended up getting connected because you sort of showed up out of nowhere. And the person that kept being said was who gave my number. I don't actually even know who that is. And they've never referred to anyone else. So it's almost like the universe just created this. It's just so fascinating how that works.
There's some magic in the field that seems like a lot of the things that we've worked on together, there's like things just show up as needed. And I also feel like because we're both very intentional with what we're doing.
That's right.
And we do prepare a lot and we really care about what we're doing and we really, take that seriously, but in a way of there's a way to like flow with this and being somebody who got to work with you like one-on-one early on. I just felt so understood and supported in a way that I hadn't always felt before. And that allowed more things to unlock in my system and places of clarity to come up. And we did some constellation-y type stuff right in the beginning. And then being able to be a part of so many constellations in the retreats that we were doing. And I've been a participant, I've watched, I've helped lead. And there's like every kind of angle of that work just showed me like so much of what was possible of a lot of the things that most of us don't get taught in society. And so that is really something I see you doing in the world a lot of is like teaching new ways of relating with everybody, whether it's spouses, friends, lovers, coworkers, retreat participants, patients, like all the different labels of the people in our worlds and family that each time I see you and we chat and I'm like, wow, you're just doing such epic work, but you're doing it yourself in an embodied way in your life. And then you get to teach more layers of that mastery and people that work with you. And then they share with me is like, oh, I did a session with Courtney and I'm like, aha, yes. How are you doing? And they're like, it's just so magical. And it was so deep. And I cried a lot. And I feel like a different person. And she's just so magical. I'm like, I know. Yes, she is. Totally agree.
That's sweet.
And it's just always really sweet to, keep kind of growing and learning together and getting to share and watch it all happen.
Yeah, we've gotten to grow so much together and grow up together, really. Like, I know another way that Kevin and I have really played roles in each other's lives, and I hope it's okay I'm putting words to this, but I also have a little hair. This is what like for me, Kevin really showed up and embodied a different kind of masculine that sort of initiated me. And then it's funny, like I often feel like you initiated something as I was preparing to meet Mike. And showing me another version of the masculine. And I know you've talked about that too in our dance, right? Like, and the way we all initiate each other when we meet each other, we initiate each other if we're intentional and we receive the initiation. And I feel like you keep being that in my life is like initiating me. Like here you are, like, I want to be a speaker. I feel that that's a big part of my journey. And I was like, how is that going to happen? And then here comes Kevin initiating me. And it's like, oh, of course. This is a role you play in my life. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And for the human design fans out there, I'm what's known as a splenic manifester, and you're a manifesting generator.
Yeah.
And, there's so much magic, and I don't even like labels necessarily, but I have found it really useful to learn more about that, just to help me orient to me more, to understand how my energy works more, because a lot of it I didn't know. I didn't know how I was actually always impacting people in, maybe great ways and maybe always not so great ways, and just learning to traverse my own nervous system. And you've been a beautiful resource with that, even just the way that you show up in the world, that I learn a lot from that. And
thanks.
that beautiful divine feminine energy that you have. And then I've learned so much from you and Mike as well in your coupleship, because like seeing the feminine and masculine dance in that, I get to then reflect that in my own life and in and out of relationships and different things, and so many things that I see you guys go through it, and then you share it. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm learning so much about that now. And thank you for showing me the way with these things. And, whether it's sticky places to traverse through, then we get to come through a new initiation level. And what you're speaking to now too is part of what instigated this podcast that we're doing right now. We have an event coming up called The New Human, October 2024. And one of my goals was to interview all the different speakers. And so I've invited you to come and speak at The New Human. I've invited you and Mike to do some work together at The New Human as well, because we were chatting before recording here that how do we possibly talk about like being new humans or moving in this new way on the planet without talking about relationship stuff? It's I think you can't really, because even being in the clinic for 15 years treating people, relationships are like the biggest like key area of our lives. And when I think about it, like we can't really maybe take everything with us from this life. I don't actually know, but I know the relational dynamics are here to teach us and teach our souls. And that creates so much richness in life. And it's often the biggest areas of challenge, which is why so many people historically, me included, are like, I'm not diving into that stuff. Nope. I'm just going to stay focused over here. And so that's really changed a lot over the last bunch of years, but you've been a continued inspiration. So I felt the intuitive energy come through in the way that I get guidance and things when I feel into the event in the fall, that I really wanted more feminine energy in the room and on the stage, because we've got some beautiful masculine lined up as well. And your face and your energy was just so clear of like, oh, I've got to ask Courtney if she would join us in this, and then, bring some of that energy and some of that beautiful feminine dynamic into the space, but about somatics and relational, pieces, because I want to continually learn about this myself. And I know many other people do. And I feel like that's going to be a really beautiful thing to weave into an event that is teaching all of us more about how to traverse this planet. And so I'm excited that you said yes.
Me
and
too.
I can't wait to see how that's going to unfold. And do you have any aspects that are really exciting to you these days around what you're learning and what you're seeing? And I know your work's constantly evolving, and your work with Mike as well and couples. And is there anything else that you want to just speak to around that and this wanting to be shared?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like what life and spirit is initiating or inviting me to kind of be a voice for, or an embodiment for, is around how important, and you were speaking to this, but how important that relational space is actually to our whole health. And how I really feel, and I love Thomas Hubel talks about this, that at the root of what is disease or unwell in this world is it's a relational issue. It's a relational issue, because, as humans, we are so connected. Like if you really go down to the atoms of us, like we can't not be connected. We're so interconnected, and we can go into our sort of human mind of like, well, I'm separate and this is who I am. And like, I'm not influenced by, but like, even if you're in that, you are influenced. We're all deeply, deeply interconnected. But what happens when we have trauma, when there's generational trauma, when there's cultural trauma, is that we can become numb to that interconnection. We can become dissociated from it. We can become walled off from it. And I think I was sharing with you how excited I was to hear this way of describing cancer, but I feel like it just like so beautifully captures this. And again, Thomas Hübl was writing about this, that, you know, a cancer cell really is a cell who has lost touch with its morphic resonance of the whole. Mm-hmm. So it's lost touch with its sense of interconnection to a whole being, and B, its differentiated role, like what it has to contribute.
Yeah.
So when it becomes so isolated and not clear about its role or its interconnection, it becomes cancer. And when I look at our culture right now, we have such an overlay, and I'm going to call this collective trauma.
Yeah.
Of a story that being well is being independent, unaffected, and separate, really.
Yeah.
But that is so at the root of so much pain, so much unwellness, because it's untrue. It's not true to our wholeness as humans. But what gets so complicated about this, right, is that in this example of cancer, the cell both has to be differentiated and interconnected. So it has to have its own contribution, but be deeply connected. Mm-hmm. And when I look at us as a culture, where the struggle is this place of like, how do I be deeply differentiated as a person, deeply in my sovereignty? Like, this is a word, right? Like deeply in like my Courtney's universe, and I am like the queen of my universe, and totally interconnected.
Yeah.
And I think that's a conundrum for a lot of people, and I think that's the place where a lot of, like, so either we can go swing one of two ways, or we do both. Is either we become super isolated to stay connected to ourselves, walled off to stay connected to ourselves, or we become so codependent, right, that we're like completely merged and lost in whatever the world wants of us, whatever's happening with the people we're relating with. Yeah. And what's tricky is either of those swings aren't actually relationship. We're learning, but in it we've actually lost the interrelating. Mm-hmm. You know,
this is so beautiful, because I've experienced this in my life too. Like everything you're sharing, I'm like, oh, I can see where codependence was a real thing. Yeah. But then I can also feel the parts of my system is like, no, I'm independent.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm so good at being independent.
Yeah.
But I actually really want to be around people sometimes. And but I'm so independent. And so like learning the layers of my own nervous system and unpacking a lot of those, patterns and things are really beautifully being met now by so many amazing practitioners like yourself, and then in community and in different spaces and things that we both create. And so I see the healing happening. And the other thing that I see in my clinic is that conversations that I get to have now are different than 10 years ago, and partly because I've evolved and grown a ton since then, and I've learned so much more about the nervous system and relationships and how that interfaces with our organ systems and our circulation patterns and everything else, but also that people are more open to having these conversations, partly just maybe because of resources, that so many resources were not really available before. So our generation seems to have like the most amount of access than any other generation previous, and more understanding and knowledge of all these amazing somatic practitioners and polyvagal theory, and people like Thomas Hübl you mentioned, and my friend Mark Groves as well, who was at the New Human last year, and his podcast is all about relationship and connectedness and all those dynamics, and there's way more books available. And I read this stuff and I take it in. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I'm so grateful that I'm getting to learn these things now, and that I am curious and unpacking that more, because it has a direct correlation to my life, because I can see for myself where I was like so fiercely independent. Even if I was in relationship, my inner experience was like, total independence.
Yes.
And then learning, how do I connect in a really healthy way, but maintain my independence? And these new words that I didn't even learn before is like interdependence. And I'm like, what even does that mean? And then certainly codependence, I've learned a lot about too. And even levels of like addiction in relationship, where sometimes you get so merged with the other person that you do kind of lose yourself. And then that can be really scary. And then you kind of pull back again. So these are really cool places to dive into. And I'm sure this is something that comes up in your couples work all the time.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm curious as that evolves too, what kinds of things are you and Mike seeing in the couples that you're working with? Because I know you've been working with some really high level couples too that have done a lot of work.
Yes.
And so what are you seeing even in those spaces that they're struggling with, that you guys are kind of templating and blueprinting? And just one more note about that too is seeing couples do that work and templating something new is something that is really needed in this world as well, because we haven't always had tremendous examples where you have like two individuals both doing their soul work and like soul induction process, but also doing that in relationship to one another. And that's like a whole new level.
Oh yeah. I'm going to say one little piece about that is like that. And then I want to answer that question is, we just interviewed Shamali the other day on our Together podcast, and we really talked about the difference in being in a relationship where we're in relationship that is, well, we just find ourselves in relationship because we love someone, versus intentionally choosing. We're using this relationship as a place to grow, as a place to evolve our consciousness, and as a place to wake up, basically, to like who we really are. And like, I'm going to do my work and you're going to do your work, and we're agreeing to that to uphold love, you know, in service to love. And this is really the kinds of couples Mike and I are calling in and supporting, and the kind of relationship we're really living, and the kind of relationship that I'd invite all of us to get curious about, because I think that that is the new human template of relationship, where we understand that that's really what relationship is like an intentional practice. If we want to be in love, it needs to be an intentional practice.
Well, and just that notion.
Yeah.
I remember being at a Tony Robbins event, Date with Destiny.
Yeah.
Day 4's relationship day. And he's talking about all the nuances, and they talked about John and Julie Gottman and different people that have had really big impacts on relational health and understanding. And he was talking about some of the most important parts and like the selection process for like partnership. And I remember that hit me so strongly. I'm like, there's a selection process?
Right.
What the fuck? How come nobody told me that when I was 23 years old, that there's actually a process to selecting like partnership? And it made me laugh inside and also cringe of, whoa, this is a deep subject that I didn't realize was way beyond where my understanding was. And I'm still in that, you know, cool learning of each relationship. But I love what you said. And I've started to see this in my life in the last bunch of years too, that it is the best place of learning. Yeah. It can be really hard. It can be really epically beautiful, but it can bring so much more forward. And so I'm so grateful for all the layers of things that can get faced if we choose in relationship to embody more of who we are. Yes. And to uncover more of that authentic pattern. And it definitely can create triggers and woundings. And if you haven't addressed some of your inner child stuff, then it's right there. Yes. And now I can see that so much more clearly. So when it happens, I'm like, oh, okay, this is okay. I'm okay. This is what's coming forward for me to actually get to the next level. This is something that needs to be addressed. Yes. And then, we can reach out, we can listen to podcasts, we can read books, we can get support for those parts of us that are really scared to be in relationship or don't want to commit, or the part that really does want to commit immediately. Yes. And feels in love immediately. And like, whoa, hey, there's the selection process.
Yes. Which, you know, when I met Mike, the gift of Mike and I is both of us had done so much. We spent a lot of time working on ourselves, like being in and really doing a lot of differentiation. And then so when we met, even though there was a quickness to our relationship, there was so much consciousness, like right from the get-go, we were negotiating like in a very conscious way, right? Like, okay, like tell me your patterns. Like, I'm going to tell you my patterns. We're like coming up with structures to even work with things. And honestly, now that I'm like doing deep relational work with people, I'm like, whoa, in a way, the idea that we would just go into relationship without talking about any of that, having any skill set, it's almost like if we think relationship is the biggest accelerator of self-growth, and it's a guru, like relationship is a guru. So it's almost like thinking that you would like drink ayahuasca or something and then just like figure it out. Like it's just like with no skills, it's like, I'm just going to take like the biggest dose of awakening, but I'm not going to have any skills. I'm not going to know anything about myself. It's like, it is going to get messy, folks. And then even if it doesn't get messy, what it will look like is dullness, lack of excitement, where it falls flat can be the other version, right? Like just like not feeling like enlivening, and now I'm just like, wow, we have a lot of work to do around teaching ourselves as a culture and about what healthy relationship looks like, but we're also evolving it. Like this is evolving consciousness, right? And
it is, yeah.
What I notice is in the couples we're working with who are really at this edge of consciousness, there's, I swear if we boil it down, like there's so much we teach and work with, but if you boil it down, it's like two things. Okay. It's it's helping each person be more in their own seat. So more in their own, this is what I'm feeling. This is what's alive for me. This is what I'm noticing in my patterning. And like, that is a huge undertaking. I almost swore there because it's such a big undertaking, because we're also programmed to talk for other people, like to sit down and be like, well, I noticed that for Kevin, da, 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 da. And it's like, okay, but what's happening for you? Like what's happening for you, Courtney? And, like this can even look like, an example is Mike moves very quickly around the home and I'm with a baby, and I often get overwhelmed by how big his energy is because he's a big man. He is a big fiery man. Just
for those that don't know Mike, he's a large, muscular human being. So.
And he's like a ginormous, so he'll walk in the house and I'll be like, oh my God, that was so overwhelming. And he's like, what? I was trying to be calm and quiet. But like, one version would be, Mike, you're being too loud and you're moving too quickly, and you're not paying attention to me. The other, this is the helpful version. I'm noticing for me, I need a certain amount of slowness in the space for me to stay regulated. And, I'm actually realizing, Mike, it'd be helpful for me if, when you enter the room, you let me know you're coming in, we go a little bit slower and you walk a bit closer towards me.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Like that's the difference. Right. But for all of us, we have so many blind spots because we don't even know ourselves enough to even know to say that. Right. We have to learn that about our
what is it that's happening that's actually making me uncomfortable right now?
Yeah.
And it can take quite a bit of excavation to understand how or why you're actually feeling.
Yes.
And then the second phase I find with that I'm learning myself too and teaching others is then voicing it.
This is the big one.
Because there's like two big steps there. What am I actually feeling?
Yes.
And what's being brought forward in me right now? And then can I advocate and speak in a way that is actually going to support the space?
Yes.
And bring more closeness and bring the movement towards. And so that's a really beautiful example. And these are areas I've definitely struggled in a lot because my tendency would often be to really like hyper attuned to the other person.
Yeah, me too.
But then when they needed me to be in my seat, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I'm like over here with them. I'm like, no, I'm attuning to you. And they're like,
but what's happening for you?
What do you need? And I'm like, that's not important. Let's just carry on over here. And it's like, but if I don't know what I need, and it was like a huge breakthrough. This might've been a few years ago now. I remember going through this session, and at the end of the session, like got into my own nervous system really deeply. And the question is like, what do you need, Kevin? And just even the question floored me. And then I was terrified with that question because I didn't know.
Yes.
And then it was such a crazy realization is I don't know what I need.
Yes.
And then I think the gap that I noticed at the time is, how do I not know what I need? And it was like, well, because you haven't been sitting in your seat paying attention. You've been paying attention to everybody else, thinking you're helping them and thinking you're making every dynamic better by doing that really well. But it's not helpful if you don't know what you need, let alone advocating for it. And it was it's like the bottom dropped out of something. At first felt pretty disconcerting, like as a man, and the masculine is like, I don't know what I need. Oh shit.
Yeah.
Oh, but then it actually opened up a lot of space to then sit in that and that deeper understanding to, okay, well, let's start the journey of understanding what do I want and what do I need? And for that to be answered organically and authentically, I'm going to have to sit in the spaces where I don't know and start to address why this is even a thing for me. And it unlocks so much. And I'm still working on that, but
it's a big one.
And in relationships, these seem to be important places to work on.
It's a big one. But what I want to speak to there is this is so key is like the more Mike and I journey into healthy relationship, like Courtney's consciousness would not have thought this at all. Like it's like how honest we are with each other. And we still have so many layers but like we joke about this sometimes, like the more health you come into in relationship, the more shockingly honest and real you are. And then sometimes now we're getting to the point where we're in spaces where we can tell it like ruffles other people's feathers. They're like, oh, because we're being so honest with each other. But realizing the more honest we are with each other, the more co-creation, the more beauty, the more love. But it's so counterintuitive to that codependent story in our head, because the story in our head is, well, interconnection is I'm going to mold myself to create harmony. Is sort of the unconscious story. And I was so in that in a big way. Although I have to say, I wasn't always the greatest at that. There was a quality in me that was a little too honest to do that well. And so I think that's why I woke up, because I was like, I'm not very good at that way, which was the gift. I can't help but say the truth. But the gift now is like, realizing the more we are honest in a really ongoing way with ourselves and with each other, the more love, the more beauty. But it's counter to what our mind thinks, because the reality is that the key skill here is we have to learn to be in that moment of uncomfortableness when I say the thing and Mike's like, oh, that hurts my feelings. Or Mike says the thing and I'm like, oh, I don't want that to be true, you know? And then we have to be able to hang out in ourselves with that uncomfortable moment.
It's so true. So true. And so uncomfortable.
Oh my God. I remember there was this one moment where I really needed to be honest about something. And I had read Conscious Loving by Gay and Katie Hendricks, and they said the microscopic truth, like you have to say them. And I was like, oh man. And I could tell it was going to be a big initiation in our relationship, because it was me reflecting back something that I felt in relation to Mike. And I had to, and I was like, well, Courtney, you're going to say it and then you're going to breathe through what that feels like. And then Mike like had so many feelings, right? And I was like, just breathe, because everything in me wanted to fix it or be like, well, but no, like,
I didn't really mean that and sugarcoat all of it.
And it was such a thing, because then of course in his reaction, he was like, how could you say that? And I remember this, finding that place in myself, because that's what's true for me. And just like, mic drop, like, you know, not that's the truth, but that's the truth for me. And then I remember he went so down into the pain. And then a half an hour later, he comes out and he's like, I feel really liberated right now. Like that was the worst moment of my life. And now I feel so free because that was so honest. And I was like,
whoa.
Yeah. Like it was such a moment of like, yeah, because what just happened is I initiated, but he joined me in another version of honesty. Yeah. So now it's like, this is the new level of honesty that we have here. And I'm here, I'm committed, I love you. And like, whoa, here's this uncomfortable thing, you know? But it was such a cool thing to watch, the alchemy, because that is not what my mind thought was going to happen. I was like, oh, great. Now I'm going to be like the mean wife and the like, da-da-da-da-da. But I had to hold in myself like, oh man, like, this is what's true, you know, and hang out there. Like, I remember like being like, whoo, yep, there's the part of me that wants to fix it right now, you know, just like breathing.
I'm such a fixer type archetype. And and thank you for sharing that, because I can feel that in my own body. And I've experienced different things in relational dynamics too, where I'm being met with some really hard truth that I feel so uncomfortable with. But I think that was one of my greatest fears in the past was, can I be okay with really high levels of discomfort? either because I'm delivering something and I'm really afraid that they're going to get upset and uncomfortable and leave or end the relationship or any number of things. And then that would prevent me from being honest. It would prevent me from taking in that space because I don't think I could handle the discomfort of delivering that.
Totally.
So then I would just hold it back. But then that creates all kinds of
so much
disconnect and mess and rupture that it is liberating, even though it's really challenging. And then really building the skill sets to be that honest and to receive that type of honesty requires such a high level of depth and foundational strength and really building these spaces in the nervous system to not come completely unglued, or if we do, to learn the skills of repair to come back in. And I'm just trying to remember who it was, but I think it might have been Terrence Real. And, you know, we're dropping lots of books and names and relational stuff. And I love that.
Yeah. Because it's like amazing resources.
So much amazing resources. Because you and Mike, I think, had recommended a book to me by Terry Real called Us.
Yes. Such a good one.
You know, even just the notion of the regular stages of relationships of like harmony, disharmony, and repair. That was like a mind-blowing thing. I'm like, wait a minute, that's normal?
Yes.
To be in harmony, something's going to happen.
Yes.
And then you're in disharmony. And what I had been taught and learned in the past was as soon as you move into disharmony, you have to fix that right away. And something's wrong, or I'm wrong, or I'm bad. Now I need to move this from disharmony to harmony. But I wouldn't actually necessarily go into the repair. Or maybe the other person didn't want to repair, or we didn't have the skill sets to do that, or we hadn't understood that that was a way to actually bring it back into a higher level of harmony. So it's like I'd take a step forward, disharmony would happen, and I'd get super scared and didn't know how to deal with it. And then I would just like create false harmony.
False harmony.
Pretend that I was good. No, I'm good actually. Yeah, it's cool. This totally cool thing. Nope. Inside though, I was like, this sucks and is not resolved at all. And then let's add a few years to that. Let's add a few more years to that. And then you have a pile of debris that can maybe get beyond repair because it's never been addressed when it was like a micro thing or even a major thing, but then actual repair. So that's been a skill I've been doing my best to learn over the last few years. And it's been really powerful to unlock so much repair within myself. Because I think the other thing I've learned is that I had so much unaddressed stuff with myself where I abandoned myself and I wasn't honest even with me, let alone the other person, that how could I actually have really clean and clear dynamics with somebody else when I had so much debris build up in my own capacity that I was like, oh man, I gotta burn this stuff off by doing self-repair. And that's actually a really cool phase that I'm in right now is so many years of like self-repair that's been needed. And it feels so good and so liberating and lonely at times and exciting though, because I can tell my skill sets are getting better to be in relationship. And totally
man. That, and see that what you're describing there, that's it. It's because both Mike and I had a deep time of that before we met, like a deep, like, I was in relationship, but I spent a lot of time in self in that relationship. There was a lot of like, that was the gift of that person having a very strong avoidant pattern, which was a gift. Yes. Cause I actually got to very deeply, and Mike too. And if we didn't have that, there's no way that we would be where we are, because for me, any moment that Mike can't meet me, that the relationship isn't the space to lean into because it's not holding what it can, like, then then I'm resting in myself. I've got my own inner masculine. I've got my own inner mother. I've got my own inner father. I've got all these skill sets and I'm always learning, but I have this place to land in where I've cultivated an inner landscape that can hold me no matter what's happening. And I've noticed so many moments in Mike and I's relationship where I've watched, this is where the relationship goes askew. And I know it from my own experience. I know it from watching, is the place where where both people actually have to let go of the relationship, not leave, but you kind of have to just surrender. You have to kind of throw your hands up and be like, I can't lean into the relationship at all right now because of whatever needs to alchemize. And so then I'm just going to come deeply into self-practice. I'm going to come deeply into myself. And then in that way, I'm not, well, Mike, you're not doing this, because that's where that goes, right? Like
Yes.
pointing is now I come into myself. Well, what do I need to cultivate? Like if Mike can't meet me, if this isn't, what do I need to do? What does Courtney need? How can I? And the minute when both people have that capacity, then you can actually stabilize a relationship in movement, because sometimes you're both leaning into the relationship. Sometimes you're both cultivating, and sometimes one of you is doing that while the other one is in themselves processing. And sometimes you both have to just go deeply into self, and you kind of have to be able to move through all those places. But if one of those spaces doesn't have enough ground, the relationship will not be able to be well, because we have to be able to dance. And again, like circling back, that's that place of the movement between deep sovereignty in connection. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, and so to understand, there is a difference between, if you're in that deep place of going deep into self, there's a difference between isolating to avoid versus going deeply into self to deeply relate with self. Because when we do that, that is relationship. Like that is going to bring us into relationship. And we just have to notice, or am I avoiding right now? You know?
Am I hermiting in the woods because I'm afraid of any and all relationships or whatever that could look like?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really curious discernment. Are you isolating, or are you like in a healthy way moving through the depths of your own self? And this is also what I see, because I get to witness you and Mike in relationship, is how, depending on what's going on, like you'll both find ways to resource yourselves and the relationship, but that there's a movement and there's often a dynamic change all the time that's happening in that.
Yes.
And I think that's also helped teach me, like, oh, you don't have to resource every single thing from the relationship, or now that there's something happening, it's like, well, you need to sort this out for me inside this container. It's like, well, maybe you need a somatic session for yourself. Yeah. Maybe you need a weekend away for yourself to cultivate that stability, reground, and then you come back into a really healthy space, and then there's a new movement again. And it's so cool to see that. So that's deep work.
Yes.
And, even speaking about like, divorce is a good topic, I would say. Yeah. That there's,
which I've technically had two.
Congratulations.
So I've gotten to journey that too.
Well, and then society's judgments or views about these things, and I've been divorced myself, and then it's like, oh, that's a fail. Yeah. And I did feel elements of that in my own self-judgment ahead of anybody else's judgment on me at the time of, maybe I did fail. I didn't do the thing I said I was going to do, which is like, this is a lifelong partnership. But when I committed to that relationship, I was like 21. And so really I noticed then, well, you're just judging that 20-year-old version of yourself. How's that fair? Yeah. He didn't know. He didn't know there was a selection process, and I have no regrets about any of that. I'm so grateful. I have, two beautiful kids that I get to be in relationship with, and I learned so much through that process. Yeah. And I even remember towards the end of that relationship, her and I were having a conversation, and she was like, oh, what? You think this has been successful because we were splitting up? And I was like, yes. Yeah. Even though that sounds crazy right now, like look at the growth and the unfolding that's happened and all the good that's come out of this 18-year partnership, that sure, a lot of people might say that's a failure or you guys messed up or whatever it was, but I wasn't going to hold it that way. There's like, no, this is massive growth for those two people that were in their early 20s who had a million unconscious patterns and family dynamics and all these other things. Like, what do you think they would do with that? Like, I think we came a long way. Wow. Yeah. But then more consciously in relationships after that, to look at it as a place of learning, a place of growth, a place of opportunity to face the different things, even when it's really hard or when it's so deeply uncomfortable. But then now it just, it feels so liberating to be able to look at relationships in that way of, oh, this person's going to teach me a bunch and I'm going to teach them. Even if we don't journey for a lifetime, okay, no less potent perhaps on what it can unlock for their life and my life, and look at what's happening in my life now. And I would say so much of the goodness in my life is from the previous relationships I've been in. And I'm sending so much love and gratitude towards those people for how much it's taught me about me and how much it's invited me to look at even when I didn't want to look at that. But now I'm much more consciously like, yep, here's a bunch of my shit and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to keep working on it.
That's right.
Even when I don't like the flavor of what I'm seeing.
Well, and that's what makes you a powerful human, right? And again, I think that's the healing, like what you're saying, what you're embodying there, like that's it. Because it's not, I have it fixed. Like when we come deeply into relationship, I was saying this to a client the other day. It's not like, oh, I did a whole bunch of work, so I figured it out. That's maybe a sign you haven't done enough work. Because when you come deeply into being human and relational, it is an ongoing, always process. We're always going to be apologizing. We're always going to need to repair. We're always going to, because it's a journey of learning together is what relationship really is.
Yeah.
So we're not ever going to get to the place of like, I figured it out. Will we have amazing tools? Yeah. Will we have more of an understanding of how to move in that space? Yeah. And we're going to mess up. We're going to make mistakes. But it's just, can we keep leaning into that and finding the love in that place, right? Which I loved feeling that, like even you saying that gratitude, it's like, oh, in all that, I still feel the love. I see the love. And this is I just want to feel the love for you in that. And just like, yes, Kevin, because I feel like this is also the next, the leaders have to embody that of like the humanness of like, I can actually like be so connected to so much magic and be deeply human and be deeply learning and deeply, and that is the potency right there.
It is.
That's the learning. And that's what I love about the relational, because what I feel the relational space does is it's deeply humbling. And if you think of like what enlightenment awakening requires, it requires a humbleness to life, like a bowing to life. And I feel like relationalness brings us into the bow. It brings us into and I'm deeply human. Like, and in constellations, there's actually a universal movement humans do when they come into a balance and they bow. And it's always a bow to other, because it's like, thank you for being my guru. Like, thank you, life.
Oh, wow. And
in that, it's not like, well, I figured it out. I know, because, it's actually like, thank you for continuing to teach me how through compassion, through empathy, through realness, and if I were to say what the second thing I see that is the most key way that Mike and I work, that is, I think, a unique flavor to how we work. I know there's people doing it, but I feel like this is the next edge in somatic relational healing, is actually helping people build the capacity to feel connection in the moment together.
Yeah.
Without processing, without like, can we just hang out here and just be in the love and allow everything that's here to be here in the love? And what that looks like in session, we'll spend a whole session just getting a couple to lean against each other and feel each other. And you would not believe the amount that moves in people, because we can be connecting, but we're not deeply feeling each other, feeling connected.
Yeah.
And when we really come into the deep feeling of like, I feel you with my body and I notice our connection, so many emotions come up, so many defense mechanisms, so many but this is what's so beautiful, is the connection itself is what heals. So, when we talk about in relationship, we can do all this processing, but if we can't find this felt sense of connection together, it will not heal. It will not. We could do all the practices if we can't feel a connection with each other, we cannot heal, because it's the connection, it's the feeling of connection that actually holds enough love to digest all the other parts.
Oh, wow.
And so for Mike and I, like, our number one skill, and it's our first go-to, is how do we get back into a feeling of connection first, and then process, and then talk about what happened.
Yeah.
But that, you want to talk about humbling, that's humbling. When everything in your body is like, I am so mad at you. Like, this is definitely your fault. Like, You're the last person I want to be close to right now. And it's like, And then now I'm learning, like my inner mother comes in and says, Courtney, are you wanting to fight or are you wanting to have love? And then I'm like, ugh, I want love. And then my inner mother's like, and you know, and then I can see the part of me that's just has this whole story about Mike, like, yeah, but he did da 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 da, and like da 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 da, and then my inner mother's like, but is that what you're wanting? And I like, no. And then my inner mother's learning to be like, I think you need to go move towards Mike, and like, can you connect? Not in a false way, not in a pretend way, not in a I'm going to act like it, but like, can I move towards him in a way that I can actually feel our love?
Oh,
you know?
beautiful.
And what that'll look like is we'll move towards each other and we'll just, like it happened last night, we had a little rupture before bed. And I went into my little like, well, you pushed me away and so I don't want to connect. And then Mike was laying there and I can feel he's learning how to navigate that. He's like, do you want to come over here and we can touch? And in my past self would want to process, right? I want to process what happened. No, we got to get to the bottom of this before I want to connect. And now it's like, that's what's needed. We need to connect.
Oh, yeah.
So then it's not ignoring the part that's hurt. What I say to myself inside is like, I see there's a pattern here we need to talk about, we need to figure out, but this isn't the moment. And then I go over, I climb into bed, even though my body, there's this part that's like, well, I don't want to connect because you didn't. And then I climb into bed and I can feel he's got the same thing going on, right? And we just embrace each other. And then the practice is to feel the part of you that does want to connect and does love this person.
There is always a part there
Always.
that wants to connect, I've noticed.
And you have to like deeply practice with noticing it, moving through the parts that are protective. And then but this is the thing, the minute we come into the embrace, we soften. And then once we're in connection, then we can talk about what happened. But when we talk about it from that place, it is a completely different landscape.
Yeah.
Like we have a whole different capacity. And so for us, every time we come back to that, we're building safety. It's easier and easier to come back. It's easier and easier. And like that is so much of what we're doing in our therapy sessions is not all of this. Can you feel each other right now? Can you notice your partner here right now? How do you notice them? You know, how does that feel in your body? And like really building that through road, you know?
Oh, this is so beautiful. Everything you've just shared the last few minutes, it felt so much energy moving through my body. It's just like the big yeses of connection first.
Yeah.
You know, connection through discomfort, actually. And all these aspects of like the sacredness of relationships and the sacredness of one another. And the depth of the impact of like bowing to each other. And that's what I feel like the new human aspect. And even with the event, that the people that come to events like this, and for this one especially coming up, we're all in that space and that energy, and we're all going to bow to each other for doing this work and facing each other and holding love in our hearts, even when we're uncomfortable with ourselves or another. That connection can still be there, even when the voice is like, no, I do want to fight right now. I do. But where's the voice of, oh, I love how you said that. It's so sweet. It's like, oh, I do want love. It's so good. Because I can feel that in me. It's like at the end of everything, no matter what I've been through, it's like, oh, I do want love. I do want to feel loved. I want to love another, because that is innately in us. And our humanness. And I've spoken about this at the last New Human events too, is like, this is a space and this is a room where all of you is welcome. That yes, we can have all these patterns and imperfections and all of those things. And this is actually what makes us human. And this is actually what builds our capacity to love. That is all welcome here. And the new human to me is just really being human, authentically human. And let's get messy a little bit here and there, but can we still connect? Because how many times I've seen either myself or others in relationship and they're in the kitchen together, but there is miles of distance, and they might actually be holding hands, but the energetic distance is vast.
Yes.
And as you were speaking earlier of that alchemy between you and Mike, the visual that I saw in my mind was like there's electricity like flowing. It's like this blue light kind of electricity that's intermingling and still connecting. Even if there's like triggers and challenge and ruptures, that electricity is still there and it still exists. And when I think about that in a space of a room with a whole bunch of amazing humans, the electricity that we can build with that interconnectedness and learn to have our own ground, but to be together in the web of life, because that's there anyway. It makes me really excited. It makes me really grateful that we're having this conversation now and that we get to build and follow our hearts and follow our creations and all the things that have led us to this point. I'm just, taking a moment inside myself to feel so much gratitude for the journey that connected us.
I know.
And the things that we're creating in the world and all the things that I see you creating yourself and you and Mike creating. And we'll put all the resources in the show notes and everything for anybody that's feeling inspired and wanting to connect. And then that you'll be on stage at the New Human delivering this type of teaching and material, but we're gonna be in it in a realness, and
there'll be it'll be an experience,
right?
Yeah,
because that is to me like what gets it in our cells and our bones. Yeah. It's not just an intellectual thing. And the energy that you hold in your system is going to teach a lot of people, because I feel your blueprint and that feminine energy so strongly in the most epic way of even just being around you teaches people, masculine and feminine, because of how much you've cultivated in yourself. And
thank you.
I can also feel that everybody that's going to be on stage at the New Human all has a tremendous heart.
Oh my goodness.
And is so loving and genuinely deeply cares about humanity.
Yeah.
That is the through energy that I feel woven into all of this. And it just makes me so excited. And I'm so grateful that we get to co-create again and coming back into this new space. And feels good.
And I'm so grateful because you and I have gotten to dance that dance of relationship, really, like, in a lot, like moving through, waves of stuff and like, and the intimacy and the trust that gets built over time, you know, like I feel that ground we're building as friends and the gratitude every time we come closer back together. And it's like, oh, this is a friend who's committing to this dance. And it's cool now to like watch what you're creating and be like, yes, Kevin, thank you for creating this. Humanity needs it. And the gifts you bring, and then also like your willingness to keep leaning in to it's a real gift. So
thank you.
Excited.
We get to face fears and obstacles together, and it feels really good. And so I'm grateful to have you on my podcast today. Yeah. And you and Mike have a together podcast, and Mike has his other Metamorphosis podcast too. And it's a whole podcasting club going on right now. And,
we got a lot to say.
Yeah, we do. Some of us want to speak, and it's an edge sometimes, and we get to learn, but I'm so grateful for this conversation this morning. Thank you for being here in person. And maybe we'll leave it there. And more to come, more magic to come. But I'm so excited about life and doing the dance with you. And what a gift to be together. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. That's it for today.